Hi, I'm horror author Paul Edwards. I've written 6 books that include banshees, so I thought it might be interesting to take a look at the film Cry of the Banshee from 1970, starring Vincent Price, and see how banshees depicted in Cry of the Banshee compare to the banshees of Folklore, and how they compare to the banshees that I've written in my book series, Mourners Woods. In 1968, Vincent Price starred in Witchfinder General. Witchfinder General was a very dark, somber film about a real-life witch hunter, Matthew Hopkins, who went from town to town helping local authorities to wrongly accuse, torture, and kill local suspected witches. It was a very bleak film. There was none of Vincent Price's usual campiness in it. It was dark, really dark. So 2 years later, Vincent Price made Cry of the Banshee. And once again, he was playing a witch hunter. So you've got the same actor in virtually the same role, and these films were set in around the same time period. Cry of the Banshee was set in 1600. Witchfinder General was set in 1645 during Cromwell's era. So they're very close time periods. So you'd think that these two films would have the same feel and look to them. But right at the opening credits of Cry of the Banshee, you know you're in trouble, because the opening credits are animated and they look like the opening credits to Monty Python's Flying Circus. And that's not a coincidence. They were created by Terry Gilliam, who did the opening credits animation to Monty Python's Flying Circus. Now, this is not a horror comedy film. It's not a spoof of Witchfinder General. So this feels completely out of place, and it makes you wonder exactly what they were thinking. And there's going to be more things that make you wonder what they were thinking in Cry of the Banshee. So Vincent Price this time is a different kind of witch hunter. He's not traveling from town to town like Matthew Hopkins did. He's a wealthy landowner who sends his sons and his men out into the village and countryside to persecute pagans. Unlike Witchfinder General, there really are witches in Cry of the Banshee. Witchfinder General had no actual witches in it. The bad guy was Matthew Hopkins, wrongly accusing people and torturing and killing them. And that was it. There was nothing supernatural going on. In Cry of the Banshee, there is something supernatural going on. There are real witches out there. So if that's what you're looking for, you'll actually prefer Cry of the Banshee. But neither the witch hunters nor the pagans are depicted favorably. You may have read or heard online, reviews that say that the pagans were depicted sympathetically in Cry of the Banshee. Not at all. I don't think that's true at all. I mean, they're openly Satanist, and as the story goes on, you'll see that they resort to the use of evil magic to kill people. So the witch hunters don't look any better. I'm not saying that, but, there's evil on both sides is the dynamic they've set up here. So what happens in Cry of the Banshee is that Vincent Price and his men find a pagan ceremony going on, and they massacre a bunch of the witches, but they purposely leave the head witch alone. They don't kill her. And so she spends the rest of the film getting supernatural revenge on Vincent Price by summoning a monster that kills off members of his household one by one. Now, not to be pro-witch hunter, but just as a matter of strategy, if you were a witch hunter and you had just massacred a whole bunch of witches, why would you let the boss witch go? It doesn't make any sense. So this is my next big objection in this film. The first was the animation. The second is, why in the world would Vincent Price's character let the head witch go? So, if for no other reason than he would want to kill her so that she wouldn't get revenge on him. So, but that's what happens. And she turns a farmhand on Vincent Price's estate into a monster. Now, when the farmhand turns into a monster, he turns into a furry, humanoid, tooth and claw kind of monster that pounces on its victims and rips them to shreds. What does that sound like? Sounds like the Hollywood version of a werewolf, not a banshee. But that's what we're given for our monster in this film. And then the farmhand turns back into human form, and nobody suspects that it's really him. In terms of the way that this movie looks and feels compared to Witchfinder General, this movie is more distasteful, I think. And that's saying a lot, because Witchfinder General faced a lot of trouble with censors in 1968. And they've more recently restored some of the footage that had been edited out. But, there was a lot of complaints about the violence in Witchfinder General. Cry of the Banshee is almost as violent, but there's more violence in it. It's just not as extreme when you're seeing it. There's more of the violence in Cry of the Banshee, although the violence was worse in Witchfinder General, I think. But also there's a lot of gratuitous nudity, not sex, but nudity on the part of the victims who are being tortured. And it's extremely distasteful. I didn't like that part of the film at all. Also, it's strange because even though this is the 1600s, every single person in this film has perfectly shampooed hair. The men, clean shaven, the clothing, all neat, no dirt or stains all over it. It looks nothing like people really would have looked in the 1600s. Witchfinder General did a lot better job of making it look authentic to the period. Now, there is one great scene in Cry of the Banshee, and that is when Vincent Price and his men go into the village, and they're trying to get information out of the villagers about where this boss witch might be hiding out. And they've gathered a crowd in the town square. And just on a hunch, they pick a young woman out of the audience, make her come forward, demand that she say where the witch is, and they have no reason to think that she knows, and she doesn't know. They're not satisfied with her answers, so they tie her to a wagon wheel and threaten to burn her alive if she doesn't talk. And she still doesn't know, so they actually do burn her alive. They murder her right in the town square in front of all the villagers. And the villagers are looking on mortified as this poor young woman is burning alive, screaming. And the villagers are mortified because someone's being murdered, but also because you can tell that they're wondering if they're going to be next. That one scene was intense. It was very frightening, and it was well done. If the whole film had been of that quality, I would be giving it a much higher review. But of course, it wasn't. So what we come to here is an issue of what really the monster was, okay? Because a banshee in Irish folklore was a spirit, and it was always a female spirit. And what the banshee would do was she would appear whenever somebody's death was imminent, and she would howl and cry and wail. So a banshee was sort of like an omen, a signal from the other side. The monster in this film, you couldn't possibly characterize as a banshee. First of all, it's an organic flesh and blood creature. It's an organism. It's not a spirit. Secondly, it's male, and the banshees were always female. And third, it's going around killing people. The whole reason it's been conjured is to murder people. The banshees of folklore were not violent. They were spooky, but they didn't hurt anybody. They kept their distance from you, and they just howled because human death got them going, got them upset. Now, in my Mourners Woods books, I have used elements of the banshees of folklore and one element that's more like what you see in Cry of the Banshee. In my book series, which is set in a haunted forest in northwestern United States, Mourners Woods, every time somebody dies within the borders of Mourners Woods, a banshee howls. And it howls only when somebody actually dies or their death is a certainty. Like if you, for instance, fall off a cliff and you're on your way down, the banshee might howl. Even though you're technically still alive, you can't possibly get out of it. So when somebody's death is inevitable in Mourners Woods, a banshee will howl. And I use the banshee howls creatively from book to book. Like a banshee will howl and you'll think that one character is about to die, but then really another character dies. That sort of thing. But the banshees in Mourners Woods are all female, just like in Irish legend. But they're not spirits. They're organisms. And that's made clear in a couple of the books. Specifically, if you look at Mourner's Tour, it's 100% clear, it's actually part of the plot, that the banshees are organic creatures. They're flesh and blood monsters, not just spirits that have popped their heads in from beyond. That's more like the monster that we're given in Cry of the Banshee. In the Mourners Woods, the banshees are not aggressive. They come out to howl because human death, gets them whipped up like sunrise whips up a rooster. It gets them agitated and they cry out. But they're not causing human death. They're not attacking human beings. They're keeping their distance, just like the folklore banshees. And if you were to approach a Mourners Woods banshee, she would either just look at you or walk away. She wouldn't attack you. So they're creepy as hell, but they're not a threat. They themselves are not going to hurt anybody. So that is very unlike the Cry of the Banshee monster and much more like the folklore monster. Well, if you're interested in classic monster films, if you're interested in the million movies that Vincent Price made, 20th century monster, 20th century horror films, genre films, I guarantee you're going to like my book series, the Mourners Woods books. They're available on Amazon.com. I put out about one a year. And they're available in ebook, paperback. Some of them are in hardcover. And they're all available in audiobook. Thanks.